Hi, moms and dads. I was recently asked a question about what the difference is between a children's emergency response plan, a CHERP, and a completed estate plan in which parents presumably took care of this with an estate planner having spent a fair amount of money on that. So here's my explanation. The vast majority of estate plans do not think through all of the issues regarding a child's care and custody in an emergency situation. And the reason is, estate planners are usually unfamiliar with the other two parts of law that pertain to children's custody, which is the Children's Code and domestic relations law. So in that lack of familiarity and also lack of service generally to younger families where the children are still at home, most estate planning attorneys have historically placed guardianship nominations inside of a will and called that good. Well, that's because they're usually serving families who are older and their children are already out of the house, or they're old enough where, 16, 17, 18, it's not nearly as pressing as a young child whose parents are involved in a tragic situation. So that just historically, it's not been thoroughly thought out and taken care of. And with the advent of technology making estate planning more available, cheaper, easier to understand and to put into place, more younger families are doing their estate plans. Hallelujah, we want that. And that necessitates a rethinking of the way we handle children's care and custody from the beginning. So we need to start at the very moments after something happens to parents, necessitating a child's custody be taken care of. So a will, you should know, a will is a dormant, dead document. It does not have any life or legal effect until we die. So we have to kind of roll back the idea that a will containing a guardianship nomination is sufficient. It actually isn't sufficient because it doesn't live until we die. So what if we're not dead, but we're incapacitated? Statistically, we know that moms and dads with children at home, the risk of death is lower than the risk of incapacity until the age of 55, where the death statistics rise, incapacity lowers enough to where death has become the more prominent risk. But up until about 55, our bigger risk is that we don't die, but we're incapacitated. So we have to think about that. And merely putting a guardianship nomination in a document that is dormant until we die is by definition insufficient. We really need our children's guardianship documents to be embodied in separate freestanding documents that we can use at the drop of a hat, in which case we don't need to have died. We just need to not be able to attend to our children. So that's one piece of why traditional estate planning doesn't really hit the mark. The other piece are the short-term issues, the issues of what happens to children in the immediate moments and hours after a parent is involved in a tragedy and can't return to their child. We have to think through that, and traditional estate plans generally don't go that far. We need to make sure that we have appointed parental delegates who have legal authority to take custody of our children if we are unable to care for them ourselves. And we need to set up alert systems to make sure that first responders, which are police and sheriff, EMTs, paramedics, child protective services, caregivers, babysitters in schools, all know who has legal authority over our children in an emergency. And that way we have no gaps in the care of our children legally or physically. So another piece of traditional estate planning that doesn't always hit the mark is making sure that people that we don't want to take custody of our children are not permitted to take custody of our children. I have had a number of clients who had family nearby who shouldn't be taking custody of children, and because they are next of kin, they would be the people called by authorities if something happened to parents. So if we may actually need to make sure and prevent some people from taking custody of our children. We can do that by being very explicit and careful about how we set up our temporary delegates and our long-term guardians. That's what a CHERP does. That's why it's better than simply relying on a traditional estate plan. In fact, it can actually go as an adjunct to an existing estate plan. So if you have one, maybe consider adding a children's emergency response plan to your estate plan to fully flush it out. And if you don't have an estate plan in place and you have minor children, you'll need to look for attorneys who can speak this language. There are precious few of them, but there are some who know how to really exquisitely care for children in an emergency situation. And if you can't find one, put a CHERP into place and allow that to support and round out a traditional estate plan, which is more about money and resourcing our families in a seamless and life-giving way. So we think of CHERP as the first step in a really thorough analysis of estate planning and how that can support our families no matter what. It's not the end of the game, but it is an excellent beginning. So I just wanted to clarify what the difference is between a CHERP and an existing estate plan in which a will nominates a permanent legal guardian, and how that's different from the fully fleshed out aspects of the Children's Emergency Response Plan. Thank you.